Okay, I think this is going to be the last movie for this grouping of movies, and this is about, well, really how do you start working with Photoshop? And basically, you have to tell Photoshop where you want to work sometimes. And we do that by creating these things called selections. Okay, so let me show you where we do this. Now, way over here, sorry. Um, this tool right here is your marquee tool. Now let's click and hold on this and see the other tools that are there. Okay, so we've got rectangular marquee, we've got elliptical marquee, we've got single row marquee and single column marquee. Okay, you might as well forget these two right now. They are basically useless. I mean, I've only found a use for them once in 20 some years of doing graphic stuff on the computer. So forget about these two. Let's focus on these two. Okay, and they pretty much do the same thing. They just do different shapes. This one does rectangles. This one does ellipses. Okay, so let's click on the rectangle one. Now, can you see my little crosshair there? This one requires that you do a click drag, not a vanilla clicks. Okay, so let's say that I'm going to select the dog's head. Click and drag, and now I've just created a selection. Okay, you can call it a marching ant selection. I will probably call it a marching ant selection most of the time. It is an industry term. Now, with this tool open, if I put my cursor in the middle, I can actually move it around. It doesn't have to stay there. Okay? Because since the tool still thinks it's being a marquee tool, it thinks we're still dealing with, moving the selection around, making sure we've chosen exactly what we want, which is cool. Okay, if I click and drag outside the shape, let's say that I do it over towards, let's say the plants over here. Do you see this where this is? If I click and drag there, then it just presumes, oh, you want to do a new selection. Okay, so it works slightly differently. Now what happens is when you've got a selection, you can do fun things. Okay, for instance, let's say that I go to the brush tool, which is this guy right there, right? Letter B on your keyboard. Now, what a selection does is it acts as a mask. Okay, let's hit my make a smaller brush here. And in fact, I'm going to change my color just for a moment. Make it something a little bit more obnoxious. There we go. So let's say that I'm going to paint. Well, look at this. I'm painting in this selection. Not too exciting. But I'm going to hold my mouse button down as I click and drag. Okay, now watch what happens. I'm going to go towards the left, and look what happens. Once I get to the edge of that marching ant, I mean, you can see my cursor there, and my mouse button is still down. As I bring it back over here, it comes back in. Okay, so that's what I mean by a mask, meaning whatever's in the selection is editable. I can make changes, I can make edits. Okay, outside there, it is masked off, it's protected. Okay, so get clear on what a selection is. It is a place to make changes, to make edits. Okay, now obviously this isn't too pretty, but you get the point, I hope. Okay, now that is just working within that selection. Now, you can do the same thing with the, let's hold on to that. The elliptical tool. Pretty much the same thing, it just creates ellipses. So click and drag, you create an ellipse. Click and drag, you create an ellipse. Okay, same situation. I'm going to go back to the brush tool, I can stay in that selection. So hopefully that makes sense. It's a masked off areas. We're going to get heavily into using masked off selections as we cruise along the quarter. But this is the basics. So that's where you start off with, is the rectangular and the elliptical marquee tools right over here. Those are your friends, those are your buddies. Okay, and then there's this tool, and this will be our last tool, I believe, today. Nope, I take that back. It'll be our third to last tool. And it's this one right here. Get to know and love this one. It's the Move tool, letter V on your keyboard. Okay, so when I come back here, this also does different things depending on where your cursor is. And also, what I'm about to show you will act a little bit differently when you've got more layers in your document, but by and large it works like this. Notice what happens. Look at my cursor there. Okay, it looks like a scissors with the cursor on it, with the arrow, right? Well, all that means is if I click and drag right now, it's going to cut this shape and move it around. Okay, I'll do that again. I'm going to undo this by hitting Command Z. Okay, so I will just click and drag, and look what happens. It moves that shape anywhere I want. It just takes those selected pixels. Okay. Now, if I were to just click and drag out here, nothing happens because it's not part of my selection. Okay, I'll do that again. Nothing's happening over here. And it barks at me, hey, don't do that. Right? So you use the move tool to just move your selected pixels. Now here's another little thing to do, and that is if you hold down the Option key, Alt key for the PC people, and that is if you click now, look what happens to my cursor. Now it looks like kind of like a little carbon copy of my arrow there. Now when I click and drag, it actually makes copies. Okay, this is actually what the Option key does quite a bit, so just be aware of that in a lot of different situations, so you might want to just try it out. But hold the Option/Alt key and it will make duplicates when you move your cursor, meaning the move tool. Okay, so that's fun. Now, there's two other things. Because once you get a selection, sometimes it's just not just a matter of you want to move it, you actually want to do something else to it. Alright? Now, this is where we come in to do our new edit menu. We haven't really played with this one yet. And go down to our friend, Transform. And there's two things we're going to play with, Scale and Rotate. Okay? So let's go to Scale. Now you notice when you put a Scale feature on, it puts this box around my marching ants, which means I can scale down. And look at this, I can do it unproportional, or I can do it proportionally. As I'm holding my mouse button down, because my finger's down on the mouse button, if I also hold the Shift key with my other hand, then what happens is that I'm scaling proportionally. Okay? So if I let go of the Shift key, it's not proportional. If I hold on to the Shift key, it is proportional. Okay? Now, here's the first thing I want to tell you, or one of the big things I want to tell you. And this is a general guideline, but it's almost a rule. Okay? When you are scaling stuff, generally speaking, you should only scale down. Okay, so here's basically my original size there, right? Which is right like this. Okay, what happens is scaling down like this is what you want to do. Make it smaller. Okay, feasibly you could scale up. Here is the problem though. Okay, when you scale up, I'm going to scale from this corner too. When you scale up, bad things start to happen to your pixels. Okay, now first of all, I'm going to point this out to you right here. Right now, Photoshop is waiting for us to complete this scaling thing we've just done. Okay, so it's waiting, and it's waiting for us to do one of two things: either cancel by hitting this button right here, which is the international no way symbol, right, or hit the checkbox. All right. So you could hit this. What happens is, let me go back to my unmasked version. The pixels that are actually in here, excuse me, they become degraded. It's like as if we had zoomed into the image. Remember how bad it was when we zoomed in? We started to see pixels. Well, that's actually what happens here. Okay, when you scale stuff up, pixels become blurry. Edge detail becomes really nasty. Let me turn off my marching ants. Oh, here's a keyboard shortcut for you. Command D. So here's my command key, letter D. Okay, that gets rid of my marching ants. Command D for deselect. It also lives over here. If we had something selected, that would be not dimmed. Okay, but Command D. Get to know and love it. Control D, obviously. Control D for the PC people, obviously. Okay, so scaling up is bad in general. Now, there are times when you can scale up. Usually, I kind of give it a guideline of you can maybe scale up, I don't know, 10, 20%. It really depends on what you're doing. It all depends on how it looks. And believe me, I've got a sharp eye for this. So when you scale up, I will point this out to you on your documents and go, you scaled up here, this looks bad. So just be aware of that. Okay, so in fact, the thing I like to say is the elevator only goes down when it comes to doing things to your image. Because typically you start off with as good an image as you can get, and from there you can only degrade the image. Okay, I'll talk more about this later in the quarter as we go along, but just keep in mind that you really can't magically make an image look better just because you say it's bigger or you say it's better. Okay, you have to start off with really good components, and then you can degrade an image to fool the human eye. That's about all you can do. The elevator only goes down. Okay, so I'm going to hit Command Option Z a couple times to get my marching ants back. There we go. In fact, I'll go back to that size. There we go. Alrighty. Now, the other thing is, that was scaling. The other thing is rotation. So now, I get that same control box, and look at my cursor. When I'm inside, I can actually move this thing around. Okay, so it's not rotation, obviously, but I'm clicking and I can move that shape around. Now, when I get my cursor towards the edge of this document, look what happens. See how my cursor turns into the kind of this double angle arrow deal? That's what you want. That tells you that you can rotate. So we can drag this all the way around wherever we want, and that's peachy keen, right? And if I were to, well, actually click towards this edge, it kind of does another double angle thing, but even that little cursor is at a rotation. So that's kind of weird, but it still means you can do the same thing. No big deal. Alrighty. Now, last thing. First of all, let me commit this. Now, I've shown you up here that you can commit to it by hitting the checkbox, or you can hit the cancel button right up here at the top, right? Okay, now, there is a keyboard shortcut equivalent of this, and this is what I want you to get used to, okay? When you look down at your keyboard, I want you to get in the habit of hitting the zero, I'm sorry, not the zero, the enter key on your keyboard. Now, where is enter? Okay, I want you to get in the habit of hitting the enter key that is at the very far right of your keyboard. Okay, now most of you who have an extended keyboard or are in the lab, you have an extended keyboard. There's an enter key over on the right side with all the new numbers over there, which is really called the 10 keypad, right? Okay, so if you hit that enter, that's going to commit your change, which I'll do right now. And of course it's not doing it now. It committed, there we go. It committed to the rotation, there we go. And it left my marching ants thinking, oh, do you still want to do something? Okay, well, no, I don't. So I'll hit Command D to deselect, and I'm ready to go. Okay, now let me just point this out to you. And PC people and Mac people, we have a little bit of a difference in our keyboards. Okay, on the Mac, we have two different kind of keys. We've got an enter key, which is over there in that 10 key area. Then we've got a return key, which is in the alphanumeric section. Okay, if you're typically looking at a PC keyboard, it's going to say enter in both places, but there is a difference. Typically, return is used in things like Microsoft Word. And when you hit the return key, you get a new line. Okay? Here in Photoshop, when you use the type tool, you'll get a new line as well. So that's why I want to deconfuse you. Get in the habit of using that enter key on the 10 keypad to commit changes. Okay? So, one last thing. The tools, let me go back 1 second and put my marching ants back there. The last thing is, these guys really don't have a keyboard shortcut, scale and rotate. Okay? But there is one available. A keyboard shortcut is available, and that is this guy right here. It's free transform. And I use this a lot. In fact, I use that almost exclusively rather than going into this menu. Okay? I will hit Command T, or obviously Control T for the PC people. Okay? So now when I hit Command T, or even hit that menu item, look what happens. It puts the control box around my marching ants. Now here's the difference. Okay? Here I've got the option of doing one of two things. I can scale. Of course, if I hit the Shift key, it's proportional, right? I can scale, or I can rotate. Now this one you have to move your cursor outside of that control just a little bit, because your cursor will change depending on what its function is. Okay, so you've got the arrow to do scaling, you've got the angled cursor to do rotation. That is what the free transform tool does. Okay, that's Command T or Control T depending on what platform you're on. So I will commit to that. I'll get rid of my mask here and deselect my marching ants. So we'll do it this way this time. Deselect. And there you go. That is Macintosh Basics. I'm sorry, not Macintosh Basics, Photoshop Basics. Alrighty, so hopefully that will prepare you well for starting Chapter 1. And I'll talk to you soon.